The big meeting room on Kepler Prime felt cold and quiet. Admiral Jake Morrison sat at the long table and looked across at the aliens who had been fighting humans for 3 long years. The Zephyrians looked like giant bugs with hard shells and sharp claws. Their black eyes showed no feelings at all. Jake had gray hair and old scars on his hands from many battles. He came to this place hoping to end the war. Next to him sat Lisa Wang, who was good at talking to aliens and making deals. On his other side was Captain Ben Taylor, who knew everything about fighting in space. All 3 humans wore their best uniforms for this important day. The room had white walls and a big round table made of clear crystal. 12 different alien races had sent people to watch the peace talks. Most of them wanted the fighting to stop because it was bad for trade and travel between star systems. The war had already killed too many people and cost too much money. Ambassador Elena Rodriguez from the Altarian Federation sat at the head of the table. Her blue skin looked smooth like water, and her big yellow eyes watched everyone carefully. She had called this meeting because her people wanted peace in this part of space. The Altarians were known for being fair and honest with all races. War Prime Zelthak led the Zephyrian group. He was bigger than the other bug aliens and had gold marks on his shell. When he talked, his voice came through a machine that made human words from his clicking sounds. The machine made his voice sound cold and angry all the time. Jake looked at the papers in front of him. The peace deal seemed fair enough. Humans would leave 3 star systems where they had built colonies. In return, the Zephyrians would promise not to attack human ships or planets anymore. It meant moving 2 million people from their homes, but it would save many more lives. The 3 systems were not the best ones anyway. 2 had planets that were too hot and dry. The 3rd had good farming land, but the weather was hard to predict. Jake knew the colonists would be sad to leave, but they would understand. Most humans just wanted their children to be safe. Elena spoke first in her calm voice. She read the peace terms out loud so everyone could hear them clearly. The humans would have 6 months to move all their people and ships from the 3 systems. After that, the Zephyrians could claim those worlds as their own. Both sides would stop all fighting right away. Lisa whispered to Jake about small changes to the deal. She wanted to make sure human traders could still travel through those systems. She also wanted promises that the Zephyrians would not hurt humans who might get lost or have ship problems in the area. These small details were important for keeping peace later. Ben was worried about something else. He had been watching reports from human spies during the talks. Some Zephyrian ships had been moving in strange ways near the border systems. It might be normal, but it made him nervous. Good soldiers always watched for signs of trouble. War Prime Zelthak listened to all the human questions without showing any feelings. His bug-like face never changed expression. Sometimes he would talk quietly to the other Zephyrians in their clicking language. The translation machine could not pick up these quiet conversations. Jake had fought against the Zephyrians for 3 years and learned to respect them as enemies. They were smart fighters and very brave. Their ships were fast and their weapons were deadly. But they also seemed to think differently than humans. Where humans might change plans quickly, the Zephyrians stuck to their first ideas even when things went wrong. The war had started when Zephyrian ships attacked human colonies without warning. They claimed the humans had built settlements on planets that belonged to the bug aliens. But humans had never been told about these old claims. The Q. Star maps from Earth showed empty systems ready for new colonies. After the attacks, Jake had led the human fleet in many battles. He tried to only hit military targets and avoid hurting Zephyrian civilians. But the bug aliens seemed to think all their people were like soldiers. They got very angry when humans destroyed their military bases because they said it hurt their group mind. Now Jake hoped the killing could finally stop. He was tired of sending young people to die in space battles. Every human ship that got destroyed meant friends and family members would never come home. The colonists just wanted to farm and build new lives among the stars. Elena asked if both sides were ready to sign the peace deal. Jake looked at his papers one more time. Everything seemed clear and fair. He was about to say yes when War Prime Zelthak raised one of his sharp claws. The bug alien leader made more clicking sounds. The translation machine worked for a few seconds before speaking. One more thing must be added to this deal. The human war leader Jake Morrison must come with us to face justice for his crimes against our people. The room became very quiet. Jake felt his heart beating faster but kept his face calm. Lisa and Ben both looked shocked. No one had expected this demand. Elena's yellow eyes grew wide with surprise. War Prime Zelthak continued talking through his machine. This human has destroyed many of our important places. He has hurt our group mind and caused great pain to our people. Our justice says he must pay for these crimes. Only then can there be real peace. Jake knew this changed everything. He had never attacked civilian targets, but the Zephyrians counted their military bases as part of their group consciousness. To them, any attack on these places was like attacking innocent people. But giving up a military commander to enemy justice would set a terrible example for future wars. The peace talks that had seemed so close to success now hung in the balance. One unexpected demand had turned hope into fear and made everyone wonder if real peace was possible at all. The talks went on for 6 more days after War Prime Zelthak made his demand. Jake Morrison sat in the same chair every morning and listened to the same arguments. The Zephyrians would not change their minds about wanting him to face their justice. The humans could not agree to give up their commander. Lisa Wang worked harder than anyone to find a way around the problem. She suggested many different ideas. Maybe Jake could be put on trial by a neutral court with judges from different alien races. Maybe he could be exiled to a far planet instead of being executed. Maybe the humans could pay money or give up extra territory instead. Each time Lisa made a new suggestion, War Prime Zelthak would listen with his black eyes staring at nothing. Then he would click his response through the translation machine. The answer was always the same. Jake Morrison must come with the Zephyrians to face their justice, or there would be no peace deal. Ben Taylor spent his time studying star maps and ship reports. Something about this whole situation felt wrong to him. In his many years as a military officer, he had learned to trust his gut feelings. The Zephyrians were acting too confident for people who wanted to end a costly war. Elena Rodriguez tried her best to help both sides find common ground. She suggested compromises and alternatives that might work for everyone. But as the days went by, she began to look tired and frustrated. The Altarian Federation had put a lot of effort into organizing these peace talks. On the 4th day, Jake was sitting in his quarters when Lieutenant Commander Alex Stone came to see him. Alex was young, but smart, and had served as Jake's aide for 2 years. He looked worried as he sat down across from his commander. "Sir, I've been thinking about this situation," Alex said quietly. "Maybe you should consider accepting exile instead of execution. If it could save 2 million colonists and end this war, it might be worth the sacrifice." Jake looked out the window at the alien city below them. Kepler Prime was a beautiful world with purple trees and orange skies. It seemed peaceful compared to all the death and destruction of the past 3 years. "Alex, if we give up our commanders every time an enemy demands it, we'll never be able to defend ourselves properly again. Every future war will start with threats against our leadership." Alex nodded but still looked troubled. "I understand, sir, but those colonists have families and children. They're counting on us to keep them safe. And they are safe as long as we don't set a precedent that makes human commanders easy targets," Jake replied. "Military leadership means being willing to make hard choices even when they cost us personally." Dr. Susan Hayes had been studying the Zephyrians during the entire peace conference. She was Earth's best expert on alien psychology and behavior. Her job was to watch how the bug aliens acted and try to understand what they were really thinking. On the 5th day, Susan came to Jake with disturbing news. "Admiral, I've been analyzing their body language and chemical signals. The Zephyrians are showing signs of what we might call anticipatory satisfaction. They're already planning their next moves as if this peace deal doesn't matter." Jake frowned at this information. "What do you think they're really after?" "I'm not sure yet, but they don't seem to be negotiating in good faith," Susan said. "Their behavior suggests they expect to get what they want through force, rather than diplomacy." Meanwhile, Captain Ryan Foster was commanding the human escort ship UNS Defender in orbit around Kepler Prime, His job was to protect the human delegation and watch for any signs of trouble. Ryan was a careful officer who always followed proper procedures. On the 6th day, Ryan noticed something strange in his sensor readings. 3 groups of Zephyrian warships were moving into position near important hyperspace routes. These were the same routes that human evacuation ships would need to use if the peace deal was signed. Ryan called Jake on a secure channel to report what he had seen. Admiral, we're picking up unusual Zephyrian fleet movements. 3 battle groups are positioning themselves along key evacuation routes. It might be routine, but the timing seems suspicious. Jake thanked Ryan for the information and shared it with Ben and Lisa. The pattern was becoming clearer. The Zephyrians seemed to be preparing for something other than peace. Dr. Susan Hayes continued her analysis of Zephyrian behavior. She had studied their species for many years and understood their group psychology better than most humans. What she discovered on the 7th day made her blood run cold. Admiral, the Zephyrians never intended to honor this treaty, she told Jake during a private meeting. Their biochemical markers show they're experiencing group excitement about future conquests. They see these talks as a trap, rather than real negotiations. Jake felt a cold anger building in his chest. He had come to this neutral world hoping to save lives and end suffering. Instead, it seemed the Zephyrians had been planning treachery from the beginning. When the talks resumed for the final time, War Prime Zelthak seemed more confident than ever. He announced that humanity had until the end of the day to accept all Zephyrian terms, including Jake's surrender. If the humans refused, the Zephyrian Empire would resume the war with what he called unprecedented force. Jake looked around the room at all the alien representatives who had come to witness these peace talks. Some looked hopeful that an agreement could still be reached. Others seemed nervous about what might happen if the talks failed completely. Elena made one last desperate attempt to save the negotiations. The Altarian Federation offered to take Jake into protective custody instead of letting the Zephyrians have him. It was a compromise that might satisfy both sides and prevent more bloodshed. War Prime Zelthak's response came quickly through his translation machine. The human leader dies by our justice, or all humans die by our might. There are no other choices. The threat was clear and final. The Zephyrians wanted either Jake's life or total war against humanity. There would be no middle ground and no more compromises. Jake stood up slowly and looked directly at the alien war leader. His voice was calm but filled with steel when he spoke. War Prime Zelthak, I've fought in 7 conflicts across 4 decades. I've seen the best and worst that intelligent species can offer each other. Today I've learned which category your people belong to. He turned to address the entire assembly of alien representatives. The human delegation formally rejects these terms. We will not sacrifice our principles or our people to appease those who negotiate in bad faith. As Jake finished speaking alarm, bells began ringing throughout the conference complex. The sound was loud and urgent, filling the air with warnings of immediate danger. Everyone in the room looked around confused and frightened. Captain Foster's voice crackled through Jake's communication device. Admiral, we're detecting massive hyperspace signatures all around the planet. Zephyrian fleets are jumping in from multiple directions. They're surrounding Kepler Prime. The betrayal was complete and perfectly timed. While War Prime Zelthak had been demanding final terms, his military forces had been moving into attack positions. The peace talks had been nothing more than an elaborate trap designed to gather human leadership in one vulnerable location. War Prime Zelthak rose to his full height as the alarms continued blaring throughout the conference complex. His hard shell gleamed under the bright lights, and his mandibles clicked in what humans had learned was Zephyrian laughter. The sound came through his translation machine as cold mechanical amusement. You humans are so predictable, the alien leader said while his black eyes stared at Jake Morrison. Your honor makes you weak and stupid. Your leaders gather like prey animals at the first mention of peace talks. Jake felt the trap closing around them but kept his expression calm. Years of military training had taught him to stay cool under pressure. He could hear Captain Foster's voice still crackling through his communication device, reporting more enemy ships arriving in orbit. Lisa Wang looked pale as she realized how completely they had been fooled. She had spent weeks preparing for these negotiations and believed the Zephyrians genuinely wanted peace. Now it was clear that every compromise she had suggested and every alternative she had offered had been meaningless gestures. Ben Taylor was already thinking like a soldier again. He quietly activated his personal scanner to check for weapons and escape routes. The conference room had only 2 exits, and both were probably being watched by Zephyrian forces. The situation looked very bad for the human delegation. Elena Rodriguez stood up from her mediator's chair with her blue skin showing patches of darker color that meant fear in Altarian body language. War Prime, this is a neutral world under Altarian protection. You cannot take military action here without violating interstellar law. The Zephyrian leader turned his attention to the blue-skinned diplomat. Your protection means nothing. Your people are weak traitors who avoid real conflict. We will take what we want and you will do nothing to stop us. Outside the building, atmospheric fighters screamed overhead, cutting off all possible escape routes. The complex's defensive shields flickered and died as Zephyrian jamming fields activated around the planet. In space, Captain Foster's ship UNS Defender found itself surrounded by 20 enemy warships. Dr. Susan Hayes was recording everything on her portable scanner. Even in this dangerous situation, her scientific mind wanted to document Zephyrian behavior for future study. What she observed confirmed her worst fears about their intentions. They're showing classic predator excitement patterns, she whispered to Jake. This was planned long before the peace talks even began. Lieutenant Commander Alex Stone moved closer to his commander, ready to follow whatever orders might come. The young officer had never been in a situation this desperate, but he trusted Jake Morrison completely. If anyone could find a way out of this trap, it would be the Admiral. War Prime Zelthak gestured to his soldiers who had been hiding throughout the complex. Armed Zephyrians in combat armor emerged from side passages and surrounded the conference table. Their weapons were designed to stun rather than kill, which meant they wanted to take prisoners. You will all come with us, the War Prime announced. The human leaders will be useful for extracting information about your military capabilities. The others will serve as examples of what happens to those who oppose the Zephyrian Empire. Jake knew they had only seconds before being captured. In that moment, he made a decision that would change everything. His hand moved to a hidden device on his belt that looked like an ordinary communication scanner. It was actually something much more important. The device contained a quantum transmitter linked directly to Earth Command through instantaneous communication technology. Jake had hoped never to use it, because activation would send a very specific message that could not be taken back. He pressed the activation sequence quickly, before any of the Zephyrian soldiers could stop him. The signal that went out across space was simple but carried enormous meaning. 2 words in ancient human military code that every officer knew. Broken arrow. War Prime Zelthak saw Jake's movement and realized what had happened. Fool, do you think your distant fleet can help you now? By the time they arrive, you will be dead and your colonies will be ash. But Jake was not thinking about rescue. The broken arrow signal meant something much more serious than a call for help. It was a declaration that peaceful solutions had failed completely, and that human survival was now at stake. It authorized the use of any means necessary to protect humanity. The Zephyrians began moving to capture the human delegation when Captain Foster's voice came through the communication. System 1 last time. Admiral, the Defender is taking heavy fire. We can't hold out much longer. The enemy has us completely surrounded. Jake closed his eyes for a moment, knowing that brave human sailors were dying in space above them. Ryan Foster and his crew had accepted a mission to protect the peace talks, knowing the risks. Now they were paying the ultimate price for Zephyrian treachery. You see how easily your people die. War Prime Zelthak clicked with satisfaction. Your ship will be destroyed, and your delegation will be taken. Then we will begin the real work of eliminating your species from this region of space. Lisa Wang found her voice despite her fear. You're talking about genocide. The other races will never allow it. The alien leader turned his black eyes toward her. The other races are weak and divided. They care only about their trade profits and will do nothing to stop us. We have studied them carefully and know they will not interfere. Dr. Susan Hayes continued analyzing Zephyrian behavior, even as soldiers moved to restrain her. "You've been planning this for years, haven't you? The original attacks on our colonies were just the beginning." "Finally, one of you understands," War Prime Zelthak replied. "Your species is young and expanding too quickly. You take resources and planets that rightfully belong to older races. It is time for humans to learn their proper place in the galaxy." Ben Taylor tried to reach for his sidearm, but Zephyrian soldiers were faster. Energy weapons stunned him before he could draw his pistol. Alex Stone suffered the same fate when he tried to protect his commander. Both men collapsed unconscious to the floor. Elena Rodriguez was backing toward the wall as Zephyrian soldiers approached her position. "The Altarian Federation will protest this violation of neutral territory. There will be consequences for breaking interstellar law." "Your protests mean nothing," the War Prime said dismissively. "When we control this entire region, your people will trade with us or face the same fate as the humans." Jake Morrison was the last human standing in the conference room. Zephyrian soldiers had their weapons trained on him, but were waiting for orders from their leader. The Admiral looked calmly at his captors, knowing that his broken arrow signal was already racing toward Earth. "War Prime Zelthak, you have made a serious mistake today," Jake said quietly. "You think you understand humans because you fought us for 3 years, but you've only seen us trying to minimize casualties and follow the rules of civilized warfare." The alien leader clicked his mandibles in amusement. "And what will change now that you are our prisoners?" Jake's expression remained calm, but his eyes grew cold as winter space. "Now you'll see what humans are really capable of when we stop following rules and start fighting for survival. You wanted to see human fury and you're about to get your wish." The stunner beam hit Jake before he could say anything else. As consciousness faded, he had one last thought about the message speeding toward Earth Command. Soon Admiral Patricia Cole would receive the broken arrow signal, and then the real war would begin. War Prime Zelthak looked down at the unconscious humans with satisfaction. The first phase of his plan had worked perfectly. Now came the second phase, which would demonstrate Zephyrian superiority to the entire galaxy. What the alien leader did not understand was that he had just made humanity's greatest mistake possible. He had attacked during peace talks and threatened genocide against an entire species. The humans he had captured were not just military officers, but symbols of everything their people stood for. This act of treachery would unite humanity in ways the Zephyrians could never imagine. The broken arrow signal reached Earth Command in less than 4 hours through quantum communication networks that the Zephyrians had never detected. Admiral Patricia Cole was reviewing fleet deployment reports in her command center deep beneath Luna Base when the priority alert flashed on her screen. Patricia had served under Jake Morrison for 10 years before taking command of human fleet operations. She knew him better than almost anyone and understood exactly what the broken arrow signal meant. Jake would never use that code unless human survival itself was at stake. "Initiate Protocol Omega immediately," Patricia ordered her staff. Around, the command center officers began activating emergency procedures that had been planned but never used. Every communication relay in human space began broadcasting the same urgent message to all military vessels. The response was faster and larger than anything in human military history. Every combat-capable ship from massive dreadnoughts to converted civilian transports received identical orders. All vessels were to proceed immediately to Kepler Prime, with maximum weapons loadout and full combat authorization. Captain Danny Clark of the heavy cruiser UNS Vengeance was conducting training exercises near Proxima Centauri when the emergency orders arrived. His ship was the closest major warship to the neutral zone and would be first to respond. Within minutes, the Vengeance was jumping to hyperspace, followed by 2 escort destroyers. The battleships UNS Fury and UNS Retribution were patrolling the outer colonies when they received the Protocol Omega transmission. Both massive vessels immediately changed course for Kepler Prime. Their captains had no idea what had happened, but they knew Broken Arrow meant the worst possible scenario. Dr. Karen Miller was working in her laboratory on Mars when the emergency mobilization began. She was Earth's leading expert on Zephyrian psychology and had spent years developing theoretical weapons designed to exploit their greatest weakness. Now those theories would be put to deadly practical use. The Zephyrian collective consciousness was their species' greatest strength but also their most vulnerable point. Because they shared thoughts and sensations across their entire population, they also shared pain and trauma. Dr. Miller had designed frequency weapons that could cause massive psychological feedback through their neural networks. Load all experimental, neural disruptor technology onto the fastest available transport, Dr. Miller ordered her research team. If the Zephyrians have betrayed the peace talks, then they're about to learn why we developed these weapons. Meanwhile, on Kepler Prime, Jake Morrison slowly regained consciousness in a Zephyrian detention cell. His head hurt from the stunner blast, and his vision was blurry, but he was alive. The cell was small and dark with walls made of some kind of metal that felt cold to the touch. Lisa Wang was in the cell next to his, looking pale but uninjured. Ben Taylor and Alex Stone were across the corridor, still unconscious from their stunning. Dr. Susan Hayes was awake and studying their prison with scientific curiosity despite their desperate situation. "Admiral, can you hear me?" Lisa whispered, through the bars between their cells. "I'm here," Jake replied quietly. "Is everyone accounted for?" "Ben and Alex are still out but breathing normally," Susan reported. "Elena Rodriguez is in a cell down the hall. The Zephyrians seem to want us alive for some reason." Jake tested the strength of his cell door and found it was solidly locked. The metal was too strong to break and there were no obvious weaknesses in the design. Their captors had been thorough in securing their prisoners. Captain Ryan Foster and the crew of UNS Defender were also being held prisoner somewhere in the same facility. Jake could hear human voices echoing from other parts of the building but could not make out specific words. At least some of his people had survived the orbital battle. War Prime Zelthak appeared in the detention area accompanied by several guards. The alien leader looked pleased with himself as he studied the captured humans through their cell bars. His mandibles clicked with satisfaction at seeing his enemies helpless. "Your rescue fleet will arrive soon," the War Prime said through his translation device. "When they do, they will find this planet defended by 3 full battle groups. Your ships will be destroyed and your leaders will watch them die." Jake stood up slowly and walked to the front of his cell. "You seem very confident for someone who just started a war with an entire species." "We are not starting anything," Zelthak replied. "We are finishing what began when your people first violated our ancient territorial claims. This region of space belongs to the Zephyrian Empire, and always has." "Ancient claims that were never registered with any galactic authority," Lisa said from her cell. "Claims that no human government was ever informed about before you started attacking our colonies." The alien leader turned his black eyes toward her. "Ignorance is not an excuse for theft. Your species has expanded too quickly and taken too much. It is time for humans to learn humility." Dr. Susan Hayes had been listening carefully to the conversation while studying Zephyrian body language. "This isn't really about territory, is it? You're afraid of human expansion because we're adapting too quickly to galactic civilization." War Prime Zelthak's mandibles stopped clicking for a moment. "Your species is young and reckless. You make alliances too easily and change too quickly. Other races see you as interesting rather than dangerous. That must be corrected." Jake realized the truth behind the Zephyrian attacks. "You're not just trying to control territory. You're trying to isolate humanity from potential allies by making us look like aggressors." "Finally, you understand," the alien leader said with obvious satisfaction. "When we destroy your rescue fleet and execute your leaders, the galaxy will see that humans cannot be trusted. No race will risk forming alliances with such dangerous and unreliable partners." The plan was more sophisticated than Jake had realized. The Zephyrians were not just trying to win a war, but to damage humanity's reputation throughout known space. If they succeeded, humans would become galactic outcasts, unable to form the alliances necessary for long-term survival. Hours passed in the dark detention cells, while the prisoners waited for news of the approaching human fleet. Jake used the time to think about everything that had led to this moment. The peace talks had been a trap from the beginning, designed to capture human leadership and isolate their forces. Ben Taylor finally woke up, and immediately began assessing their tactical situation. Even as a prisoner, he was thinking like a soldier and looking for any opportunity to escape or fight back. Alex Stone regained consciousness soon after and began whispering with his commander about possible rescue scenarios. Elena Rodriguez was brought to the same detention area by Zephyrian guards. The Altarian diplomat looked angry rather than frightened. This is a violation of every interstellar treaty regarding neutral worlds and diplomatic immunity. Treaties are for equals, War Prime Zelthak replied. The Altarian Federation will do nothing because they are too weak to challenge Zephyrian power. Your people care only about trade profits and will not risk war over a few human prisoners. Elena's blue skin darkened with emotion. You underestimate the consequences of betraying galactic law. Other races will not ignore such blatant violations of diplomatic protocol. The alien leader seemed unconcerned about galactic opinion. When we control this entire region, other races will have no choice but to accept Zephyrian dominance. Trade will flow through our systems and we will decide which species deserve continued existence. Jake listened to this exchange while thinking about the broken arrow signal he had sent. By now, Patricia Cole would have received the message and begun mobilizing every available human warship. The Zephyrians expected a rescue attempt, but they had no idea what was really coming their way. The sound of explosions echoed through the building as the first human ships arrived in orbit around Kepler Prime. War Prime Zelthak smiled with his mandibles clicking in anticipation. Your fleet has arrived right on schedule. Soon you will watch them burn. But Jake Morrison knew something the alien leader did not understand. The approaching human fleet was not coming to rescue prisoners or negotiate for their release. They were coming to demonstrate what happened when humans were pushed beyond all reasonable limits. The real war was about to begin. The human fleet arrived at Kepler Prime in 3 massive waves that made space itself seem to bend under their combined mass. Admiral Patricia Cole had divided her forces into specialized task groups, each with a specific mission that would demonstrate human capabilities to the entire galaxy. Captain Danny Clark's heavy cruiser UNS Vengeance led the first assault wave, diving straight into the heart of the Zephyrian orbital formation. The aliens had expected a desperate rescue attempt by a small force, but instead found themselves facing the largest military mobilization in human history. The Vengeance's experimental plasma cannons tore through Zephyrian shields like they were made of paper. These weapons had been designed in secret laboratories and never used in actual combat until now. The alien ships had no defense against technology they had never encountered before. Behind Clark's cruiser came the battleships UNS Fury and UN's Retribution with their massive gun batteries already locked onto enemy targets. The 2 dreadnoughts opened fire simultaneously, sending streams of concentrated energy that vaporized entire Zephyrian squadrons in seconds. Dr. Karen Miller's neural disruption weapons proved even more devastating than the conventional firepower. As human ships began broadcasting specific frequencies designed to overload Zephyrian consciousness networks, entire enemy crews collapsed in agony throughout their fleet. The collective consciousness that made Zephyrians so effective in normal combat became their greatest weakness when facing weapons designed to exploit it. Pain and terror cascaded through their shared mental networks, causing psychological feedback that crippled their ability to fight effectively. On the planet's surface, Major Kate Sullivan led human special forces in a lightning assault on the detention facility where Jake Morrison and his delegation were being held prisoner. These soldiers were not following normal rules of engagement anymore because their enemies had abandoned all pretense of civilized warfare. Kate's team moved through Zephyrian defensive positions with brutal efficiency that shocked their alien opponents. The bug aliens had studied human military tactics for 3 years, but had never seen humans fighting with the desperate fury of a species protecting its pack leaders. War Prime Zelthak watched his carefully planned ambush falling apart on multiple fronts. His fleet was being destroyed by weapons that defied his understanding of human technology. His ground forces were retreating before assault troops that fought like wild animals rather than disciplined soldiers. This is impossible, the alien leader clicked to his subordinates. Our intelligence report showed the humans had only a few dozen major warships in this region. Where did all these vessels come from? His tactical officer provided the disturbing answer. War Prime, we are detecting over 300 human ships in this system. They appear to have mobilized their entire military for this assault. Dr. Susan Hayes was still recording everything from her prison cell when the neural disruption broadcast reached the planet's surface. Zephyrian guards throughout the facility began writhing in pain as feedback from the space battle affected their group consciousness. Fascinating, she whispered while watching their captors suffer. The humans have weaponized the Zephyrian collective mind against itself. Every ship destroyed in orbit increases the psychological trauma experienced by all members of their species. War Prime. Zelthak himself fell to the floor of the detention area as waves of agony from his dying fleet overwhelmed his mental defenses. The alien leader who had seemed so confident just hours earlier was now convulsing helplessly while his empire burned in space above. Jake Morrison stepped over the writhing Zephyrian's body without a glance as Major Sullivan's troops breached the detention facility. The Admiral's expression was calm, but his eyes held a cold anger that spoke of fundamental changes in human military doctrine. "Admiral, are you injured?" Kate asked while her soldiers secured the area. "No, Major, but our situation has changed dramatically," Jake replied. "Have you established communication with Admiral Cole?" "Yes, sir. The Apocalypse is holding position in high orbit, waiting for your orders." Jake nodded grimly at the mention of humanity's newest and most terrible weapon. The UNS Apocalypse was a prototype planet killer that had never been tested in actual combat. Its mere presence in the system announced that humans had crossed a threshold from which there could be no return. Lisa Wang looked pale as she realized the implications of what was happening. "Jake, they brought a planet killer to rescue us? What message does that send to the rest of the galaxy?" "It sends exactly the message I intended," Jake replied coldly. "The Zephyrians wanted to see human fury and learn what happens when our species is pushed beyond all reasonable limits. Now they get their education." Captain Ryan Foster and his surviving crew members were also rescued from the detention facility. The young officer looked shocked at the scope of the human response to their capture. "Admiral, how many ships did Earth Command send?" "Every combat-capable vessel in human space," Jake answered. "Over 400 warships, including prototypes that were never supposed to leave our shipyards. The Zephyrians declared total war, so they get to face our total response." Ben Taylor was already thinking about the strategic implications of such a massive deployment. "Sir, this represents almost our entire military capacity. If other hostile species decide to attack while we're concentrated here, then they'll learn the same lesson the Zephyrians are learning," Jake said grimly. "Humanity can be negotiated with, reasoned with, and even befriended. But we should never be betrayed or threatened with genocide." Dr. Karen Miller's psychological warfare continued to devastate Zephyrian forces throughout the system. The feedback from destroyed ships and dying crews created a cascade effect that paralyzed their remaining military units. Their greatest strength had become an insurmountable weakness. As Jake's shuttle cleared Kepler Prime's atmosphere, he opened a channel to the Zephyrian High Command. His words were transmitted across their entire communication network, ensuring every member of their species would hear them clearly. "This is Admiral Jake Morrison speaking to the Zephyrian Empire. You wanted to see human fury and you betrayed peace talks while threatening genocide against our entire species. Now you understand why every race that has pushed humanity to this point has learned the same hard lesson." Jake's voice was calm but carried the weight of absolute certainty. "We are not prey animals waiting to be hunted. We are persistence predators, and you have just made yourselves our prey. The hunt begins now, and it will not end until your empire surrenders unconditionally." The space battle continued for 6 more hours, but the outcome was never in doubt after. The neural disruption weapons began their work. Zephyrian ships either fled the system or were destroyed by human forces that showed no mercy to enemies who had violated every principle of civilized warfare. War Prime Zelthak survived the battle, but his mind was shattered by the psychological feedback from his fleet's destruction. The alien leader who had planned humanity's humiliation spent his remaining days in a medical facility, unable to form coherent thoughts. The war that followed was remembered not for its battles, but for how quickly it ended. The Zephyrian Empire, which had dominated its region of space for thousands of years, surrendered unconditionally within 18 months. Their collective consciousness never fully recovered from the trauma of facing weapons designed specifically to exploit their greatest vulnerability. Across the galaxy, other species learned a valuable lesson about humanity. Humans could be negotiated with, reasoned with, traded with, and even befriended. They were generous allies and fair trading partners who followed the rules of civilized interaction, but they should never ever be betrayed during peace talks or threatened with genocide. Because when humans stopped following rules and started fighting for survival, they became something that no other species wanted to face. The memory of what happened to the Zephyrian Empire served as a permanent reminder of that truth. Jake Morrison returned to Earth as a hero, but he took no satisfaction in the victory. The cost of the Zephyrian betrayal had been enormous in both human and alien lives. He hoped future generations would remember the lesson and choose diplomacy over treachery when dealing with humanity. The galaxy was a safer place for it, but the price of that safety had been written in blood and terror across the stars themselves.